Hello and welcome to the ReConnect podcast, a weekly show sponsored by Anasazi Foundation and powered by Sturry. I'm your host, Ganel-Lyn, and the purpose of this podcast is to help you improve your life by strengthening your most important relationships and connecting to your truest self. I am so thrilled today to be with my guest, Megan Johnson. We are here to talk about a really important subject that I think overlaps in both of our whys and our missions in different ways. And hopefully this podcast will be shared with all of your friends and family. If they come to your mind as we're talking, please forward it to them because this is a life-saving conversation that we need to have. We're going to be tackling the topic of postpartum depression, suicide, and anything else that we feel directed. For those of you that are new to the ReConnect podcast, this is a non-denominational podcast, but we do talk about faith in God. If you don't define your higher power in that way, please know that we're not trying to alienate or offend any demographic, but I don't know another way to get through life. So you want an authentic conversation. Megan and I are both going to go there with God because it's how I've survived a lot of things and it's the only way I find joy in my life. So to just preface this conversation, I just want that to be known ahead of time. Megan, tell us a little bit about you. You know, the general bio. Mm-hmm. You're married, kids, yes, all of that.
Yes, I've been married for 13 years. I have 4 very energetic and rambunctious boys ranging from ages 9 to 2. I'm also a clinical therapist. I've been practicing as a therapist for about 12 years. And I'm also the co-founder of the Emily Effect Foundation, which honors my sister Emily Cook Dyches, who I lost to postpartum anxiety 3 years ago. And we started a foundation in her name to raise awareness surrounding postpartum mood disorders.
And I'm already crying, which is a really good sign. It means we're in the right channel already. Before your loss, we share that for those that know my history and story. 5 years ago last week, my sister's suicide, and it was from a different, maybe struggle place, but we share, I think, a similar passion for having a different conversation around the idea of suicide, of postpartum, women's issues, and mental health.
Yes.
Previous to losing your sister, Emily, and I think Emily Effect had burst on the scene in a time where I was working in this same field in some ways, and I just was so grateful that your family and everyone involved, Emily's husband, I think specifically, right?
Yes.
Really spearheaded a conversation that was so lacking around postpartum anxiety and depression. But before we get really into that, as a clinical psychologist, are you practicing right now? Do you have a practice of meeting with and doing therapy?
Yeah, I'm currently working on starting up a private practice. I've been working at LDS Family Services for about 12 years.
So in the work that you were doing, what were you seeing in regards to postpartum anxiety?
I kind of range a little bit. I work a lot with teenagers as well as women, a lot of with abuse issues, depression, anxiety, things like that. So postpartum hasn't necessarily been my focus as a clinical therapist, but it's something that since losing my sister, I have definitely dove into and learned a lot more about and made sure that that is an important knowledge and background that I have in working with people.
How many siblings in your family?
So there's 5 of us total, and I'm the youngest.
And you're the youngest, and where was Emily in that?
Emily was the second. So we have my brother who's the oldest, and then there's 4 of us girls, bless my brother's heart. And
so Emily was the oldest daughter.
She was the oldest sister. So she was my example. She was my idol growing up. She was the person that I wanted to be like. She set the stage for us and has influenced my life in so many ways.
And how many children did Emily have?
She had 5.
5.
Mm-hmm.
And how long had she been married when she passed?
She had been married almost 20 years.
Okay.
In that range.
And because we speak a similar language, I'm going to ask the cliche questions that I always get asked, which is, had she struggled with anxiety, depression, and was that known in your family?
So she hadn't struggled with anxiety and depression on the level that she did after she had her 5th baby, Trey. Occasional baby blues, a little bit of anxiety here and there, but not on a clinical level to where she felt like she needed to seek help.
So regarding postpartum anxiety, the language verbiage around that right now, there's postpartum depression and anxiety. For our viewers, how would you define those 2 terms?
So what's really interesting is I think that a lot of the postpartum, when we think of that, it gets lumped into simply
Yeah.
just depression. There's actually postpartum mood and anxiety disorders.
And
There's
psychosis as well,
yes,
right?
psychosis. There's postpartum OCD, postpartum PTSD, and we even don't often talk about how these disorders can show up in the perinatal period, which means during pregnancy.
Yeah, because of the hormonal inflections.
Exactly. So a lot of it is an assumption that they happen afterwards, but more often than not, they're actually occurring during that prenatal period.
So that's really helpful information. I have a neighbor who has lost babies gestationally, right? And she's about to carry her baby after 3 losses, a full-term baby. And she started noticing prenatal,
yes,
PTSD because
Yeah.
of just literally going to the same imaging center every time for an ultrasound.
Yes.
And all of a sudden she noticed she would just get shut down. Some other behaviors would show up. So I think that's a really important aspect of this conversation that we need to have, because you can start to see patterns if you've already had a baby and then you see that something has developed. Then you start adding to the toolbox way before you are now sleep deprived with a new baby
exactly.
at home.
It's all about preparation.
Yeah. Personality wise, the only reason I ask this is I tend to be a whatever type A personality, and I know that with both of my children, I had to be super aware of my expectations, some of my patterns that I do for self-care that really help me stay in a good headspace. With mental health, bipolar in our family, I was very aware of pits. I call them the pit.
Yes.
And I will say to my friends and my support system, I would say my foot is in the pit, my knee is in the pit. If my waist is, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
I never allowed myself to get all the way in the pit because I had watched family members never quite be able to cycle out of them. What would you say to our listeners who are thinking of themselves as not someone that has struggled with postpartum issues or even prenatal PTSD, OCD, depression, anxiety, but as a personality type? Was Emily high strung, high achiever? Was the bar high in her life? Did she expect a lot of herself? Were there patterns that way that you could kind of see, I'm more susceptible?
Yeah, there were definitely patterns there. I think that a lot of us as women tend to struggle with that, but there were patterns there. I think it's really important to recognize going in, especially to the postpartum period, all those factors that affect how we feel, right? The sleep deprivation, all of those things, and just preparing yourself ahead of time, knowing that it's usually the basics that tend to go out the window first. And so that's such an important time to focus on those basics. And those are factors to recognize. Am I getting enough sleep? Am I getting some sort of movement? I'm not saying extreme exercise at that point, obviously, but recognizing, am I doing the basics? And I think that that's a big key for a lot of us as women, is because I think we almost overlook them so much to the point that when they get overlooked, we're not doing them, and they're actually the greatest foundation that we have for our mental and emotional health.
And I think let's pause there for a minute, because as women generally, I'm not discounting the emphasis that a father places on the life of a child, but as women, as mothers, we're wired to, I think, from a very guttural place, protect our children, and that means we will sacrifice ourselves to protect, and over a period of a week, for me, I can go into a really dark place if I'm not getting good sleep, right?
Yes.
And if you know that self-care is not selfish,
Right.
but it's life-saving.
Exactly.
But then all of a sudden you have a newborn, and if you have other children, it can compound pretty fast.
Exactly.
You can get to a danger zone pretty fast, and unless you're having a conversation beforehand, what do you say to people did you see with your sister that she, with other children, had struggled to maintain some of those safeguards, or was she even aware that she was susceptible? Did you ever have a conversation with her based on your professional experiences or as a sister?
Yeah, not as much with her previous children. Like I said, I mean, there were conversations there, and she had more experienced baby blues, but was different this last time around. There were some complications when she gave birth, so that's a big factor to be aware of just knowing, have there been complications in the pregnancy? Were there complications during childbirth? All those things, because that increases those factors of being able to
vulnerability.
and experiencing anxiety. And so because of that factor, there was kind of an immediate thing that we all noticed as her family, especially Eric, her husband, there was that increased anxiety she was struggling to nurse. That was a big factor. So,
which, if you're a nursing mom, you understand there's just this hurdle that you have to get over to let that go, especially if you've successfully felt like you've been able to nurse previously.
And that was the case for her. She had been able to nurse. We all know how important it is. It's all preached to us, which is a good thing, but I think that that's an important aspect that we should be educated on, is to strive for those things, but also to know, like, at the end of the day, what's most important is our mental, emotional, just as much as our physical health, right? And so, like you were just saying, one of the best things that we can do to take care of our families is to take care of ourselves. It's that whole analogy that we hear on the airplane, right, of putting the air mask
first and then
on yourself and then others.
And literally, for that analogy, the reason it's used so often is because if you don't, the seconds it takes to lose consciousness without the air makes you literally incapable of helping who's sitting next to your child. And I think if we're going to frame a conversation around postpartum anxiety or depression, OCD, whatever, trauma, we have to understand that literally there is a short window sometimes for all of us. And maybe we don't know it for the first baby, or maybe it's compounded because there's an issue with nursing or the delivery or whatever. Did her husband start to see signs? Were there conversations previous to her passing that had alerted anyone that she was this vulnerable? Or, like in many cases, and this is why I love podcasts and YouTube videos, is that we're reaching people that are quietly hiding in their closet or in their bed, literally struggling because they're so afraid that everyone else in the neighborhood is nursing effectively, getting groceries bought, getting showered, taking care of the homework for their other kids, whatever is on the checklist, and they don't want anyone to know that they're really spiraling out of control. Was there an awareness for either your family or Eric that it was getting dangerous?
Yes, it was. I think especially those first few weeks after she had Trey, it was noticeable. They were proactive. Emily was open. She was especially open with Eric, and they sought help, talked to their OB, got on medication, and pretty much this went on for a year where it was up and down, and things did get stabilized after those first few rough months.
To pause there, you just said a year, and I think that's so important.
Exactly, yeah.
We're not talking about moms that only have 2-week-olds or 2-month-olds.
Right.
We're talking moms that have 2-year-olds sometimes,
Yes.
especially if there's no intervention and there's no treatment. So she was past the year mark.
She was almost at the year mark, actually, about the time of her passing. But like I said, those first few weeks, even month, they were rough, but we kind of got through it. It was still a rough year overall, but it wasn't to that level that it was those first few months. And then kind of as it came to the close of the year again, those few months before it, that anxiety just increased and kind of resurfaced and came back again. And again, they were proactive. Emily shared, Emily talked, she talked to us about it. But I mean, the struggle was, finding the resources, finding things that were specific to maternal mental health for moms, because it is a niche and there are certain factors that need to be taken into consideration when you're seeking help.
So how old was the child? Just older than the baby?
5.
5, okay. So there had been a few years
Yes.
since she had gone through this stage.
Yes.
And I think age plays a factor in that too.
Sure.
I mean, I'm 48. If I was, heaven bless, please God, no. But if I was to be in this situation, I was just saying before we started taping, my daughter this week, as of this taping, has a baby for a school assignment that is programmed, right? Feeding, changing, waking up at night.
Yeah.
And we just had this conversation last night. It was very interesting because she's had the baby for a few days. She's finding things that are working, right?
Yeah.
And she's 15, and she just said, well, when it's my real baby, I'll get more sleep. And I said, oh, no.
Yeah.
Because the baby's programmed right now, so she's starting to see patterns. And I know tonight for this baby project, the baby's going to wake up more, but later in the evening. And I just said, and we had a really honest conversation about her brother, my first, and the sleep patterns, and her and the sleep patterns, and what. There was a gap of almost 6 years between my children, and so in many ways my second one was easier because I had learned some parts of me that learned to let certain things go. I also learned a new system that for that baby worked for getting that baby to sleep. And I told her, I said, if you get this much of a stretch that you already know this programmed fake baby is going to do,
Yes.
you don't know that as a mom.
Right.
And I remember that, like, if a nap got dropped, oh my gosh.
Right.
Forget about it. It
Right.
was like, or give me $1 million. I joke. I will say when I speak to women's groups, if someone offered me those first few months $1 million or a night in a hotel to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
I would have for sure taken a night in a hotel.
Yes.
That's how much I would fantasize and crave sleep.
Yes.
And my daughter said, well, can you hire someone to come feed the baby in the middle of the night? I said, you can. But if you're nursing, and I'll do that as your mom, I'll come, and if you need a night, to ask for that. Did Emily start to ask for things at that year mark, or did it spiral pretty fast because there had been earlier intervention, so everyone kind of thought she was getting the help she needed? Because I think there's a difference between a new mom that you think, oh, wait, I'm seeing some patterns, and a mom that I've already experienced this, so we know what to kind of look for. And then a mom like maybe Emily who had done some interventions, but then as the year progressed, did everyone kind of go back to normal?
I would say maybe a little bit, yes.
And that's not to put on, on anybody else.
Right. Yeah, but I they asked for help, especially when it got, that anxiety came back and it was harder those last few months. My mom and her mother-in-law would come and help with the kids and do those kind of things. And so I feel like with what we're talking about, if there's anybody or anything that I could say today that I would want anybody to take away is, it's that simple thing of sleep again, right, that we're talking about. And I think we feel so much mom guilt if we take that nap during when we should maybe be folding laundry or we should be playing with our other kids.
Paying the bills, emptying the dishwasher.
Yeah, that lack of sleep, though, from a mental health perspective, it is the one factor. It's the foundation of our mental and emotional health. And so if that is not where it needs to be, and we already know how tricky and how difficult that is when you have a new baby. And so I would say to a new mom or any mom, the best thing that they can do for themselves is to prioritize their sleep. If that means, taking shifts with your husband, if that means asking a friend to watch your other kids so that you can take a nap in the afternoon, if that means asking for help with other household chores later on so that you can do those things, that is probably one of the best things you can do for yourself.
And I think if this podcast is reaching someone in some crisis, I have had one of those months or weeks where I am very sleep deprived right now.
Yeah.
I know Friday, Saturday of this weekend, I do not have things scheduled. I don't care if the president of, I don't know, Argentina called me. I didn't want to get political there.
Yes.
And asked me to fly to Argentina because there was a crisis on suicide and he needed my help. I would say not this weekend.
Yes.
I can feel it. I can feel how on the edge I am and how I'm depleted right now, right? But I know that there are parts of my story in my head this week that are resentment, victim, like my sweet husband, if he listens to this, he started a new job this month. So my March was already busy. We weren't planning on a new job transition on top of that. For those that are listening, you start to get into a place of like, well, that's easy for you to say. My mother-in-law aren't helpful.
Right.
I don't have resources to hire out a house cleaner. It's very easy when you're in sleep deprivation and hormonal changes, just those two factors, to think, there are no options. I do not have support and help. I would say to those listening, if you have any extra money, and housekeeping is the reason why you can't shut your brain off to take a nap, it is literally a life or death choice.
I agree.
You pay the $50 or the $100 and you get someone to come vacuum and do the laundry or whatever that is. That's how passionate I feel about saying, and because I've had chronic illness issues and long-term chemotherapy, those were the greatest teachers for me. I knew I wouldn't be writing books, speaking, alive, married probably, or a relationship with my children if I didn't say, when we had no job, literally no money, I still made space in our budget for some self-care. Exactly. Because it would have destroyed me first and then the family. So what do you say to people that are in the mindset of there are no options for me, I have no resources, there's no one I can call?
I feel like just with anything, we are going to find what we're seeking, right? So if you have that mindset there is an option. I can find something, but then you will find something.
Yes.
You will have a conversation with your neighbor next door or someone in your church group, anybody like that. But if you start to have that dialogue in your head that there are options, I can find something, you will find something. Because what we tend to put out there, especially in terms of our thinking, is what we tend to find.
To see.
Right?
Yeah, this week I keep seeing how tired I am because
Yes.
I keep talking
Yes.
about how tired
Yes.
I am.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing too. If you are married and you're dealing with some of these ideas, what are the signals you're seeing? You're not able to get out of bed. You're not able to take care of yourself. You're overly quickly reacting emotionally.
Yes.
What other things are you seeing that maybe...
Irritability is a big one. That's not one that we often think of
Okay.
because it's usually we're thinking more sadness and being lethargic.
But if you're
those kind of
snapping
things.
at everybody.
Yeah, if you're snappy because you're irritable because you're tired, right?
Yeah.
And you've got different things
Yeah,
going on with
the
your
truck
hormones.
driver ahead of me on the way up today,
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
I don't usually want to be mad at the driver on the road because we're doing the
Yes.
best we can. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those kinds of signs.
Yeah, and I also think it's important that we recognize that postpartum depression and these other disorders, it's not just a mom who cannot get out of bed and who can't function. Amy Rose White, who heads up Postpartum Support Utah, she always says this, which I love to share with people, is that sometimes the ones she worries about most are the ones that seem to be doing the best and that are functioning. So we can be still functioning, but I think a big key to recognize when you're struggling too is, do you feel like yourself? I think we try to go through diagnosis and all these symptoms and all these different things, which is good, but I think the simplest question you can ask yourself is, do I feel like myself? And if you're not feeling like yourself, if you're not enjoying things that you used to enjoy, don't have the energy, and you're irritable, all those things, then that's a telltale sign that, okay, I need to talk to somebody, whether it's with my family. I need to start somewhere and recognize that I need to come in together and have a plan to take care of this.
So what I hear you saying is connecting and asking for help is one of the first steps to take.
Yes.
But one of the first symptoms I see within myself and the community I try to serve is isolation becomes the first signal you're in trouble.
Exactly.
And so one of the things I share when I'm out speaking or doing any media is your 3 SOS friends. And you define those 3 before you're in crisis. So you literally have a conversation with your top 3 trusted people and you say, you're on my SOS list. If you get a text from me that says SOS, I can't explain to you. You're just going to need to know I'm in trouble. And can we agree to that? Because Y3, you will talk yourself out of the first 2. They just had a baby. They're going through financial stress. They have a whatever. I think 3 is a helpful number of people that you're like, listen, before we're even having the baby, getting pregnant, whatever. And I think it's important to say, and the baby can be up to how old, and you would still diagnose it as a postpartum issue.
Right.
How long would you really say that could still be part of the diagnosis?
They say 1 year. I think especially if you haven't recognized and treated it, I think any depression that you're experiencing after that still is connected to that, right?
Okay, because of the changes in your body, your hormones,
you're still being
your
affected
life.
by it.
Your lifestyle.
It's carrying over.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as to return to your sister's story, so as things started to surface that what was being done wasn't enough, take us through that last few days or weeks. What time frame would you say pick up the story that we can learn from that?
Yeah. So about a month before she passed away is when that anxiety had just reached the level that it hadn't before in that year prior. And so she was hospitalized and spent 10 long days in the hospital. And what was difficult about that is that it wasn't specific to postpartum care, right? So she was...
Once again.
Yes, lumped in with people that weren't going through similar things. She had to stop nursing overnight because she couldn't bring her baby.
And
those
that
kind
alone
of things.
is a trigger, yeah.
It was, but she was amazing, and she made it through those 10 days and came home, and they were working through it again, and she had a few really good weeks there. And it resurfaced again. I mean, anxiety, a lot of these things, they just tend to cycle. And so it had come to a head again, and she was struggling again, and to the point where she actually wanted to go and be with my parents that day, and she was with my dad, and they were actually going to take her on a trip with them. And when they were driving to take her back home to get her things, she was experiencing a lot of anxiety that day, and that anxiety had reached a level. She had done so much for that past year to work through everything. It was on such a level that she had never experienced before. Everything that she had gone through was so contrary to
Her values
and who she was, and all of those types of things. And so the anxiety just kind of reached that final boiling point where she had a major panic attack, to the point where she felt like she needed to get out of the car, and she attempted to do so, and that resulted in the accident that took her life.
So thank you for sharing that. As you were talking, I was thinking that we didn't mention one of the most obvious signs something's wrong. If you're having any thoughts of hurting yourself at all,
yes,
you need to let someone know
exactly
right now. Like,
exactly.
Stop listening to the podcast and reach out to someone and say, I often have people say, well, I don't know how to explain it. You can literally text or call anyone and say, I'm not myself and I'm having thoughts of harming myself.
Yes.
Okay. And that's any other thoughts on that?
I do, yeah. I think especially for moms, because in this scenario, when moms have babies, something that is common that happens is there's these thoughts of hurting your baby. Thoughts, these images that come, these intrusive thoughts that are so completely contrary to these moms and what they've ever thought or felt before, that it scares them. And then they get scared to even share that. What are people going to think of me? What is my husband going to think? Are they going to let me be around my baby? And so I want to be very open and very clear about this, that this is common. It's not normal, but it's common, is the way that we like
I
to
love
say
that.
right?
It's not what we want you to, we don't want you to stay in that state, but it is common for people, but we're not talking about it.
Yeah, it's a common result of all these different factors that we're talking
Right.
about, right? These postpartum mood disorders are the most common complication of childbirth. They're more common than high blood pressure and gestational diabetes, all these things that we're always talking about and educating everybody about. And so the reason I share that is because when you have those thoughts, it's important to share. Yeah. And that's where you get the help.
I have a new book that will be out by the time this airs, and a mutual friend of ours, Lindsay Ertz, writes very openly and honestly about her postpartum journey and having really violent, scary thoughts of harming her baby, in addition to some OCD issues that really took her on a journey, and she's become a great advocate. She's a radio personality here locally in Utah, and a dear friend of mine. And the book, I Can Choose Joy with God, she talks about learning and being given skills and tools to choose into a thought pattern or a behavior for the day, for the hour, for the minute, right? But how she was in conflict to even admit, right? And she shares really specifically, and it sounds like Emily did the same, reaching out to certain people saying, today I can't be alone. Today I can't do this. Your parents were driving the car?
My father was, yeah.
Your father was.
Yeah.
And this is where our stories converge a little, because a conversation around suicide, any chance I can have one, I have it. And it's because everyone in the world falls into the three categories. One, they love someone that struggles with mental issues of any sort. And I don't always love the word illness, but because it makes it feel like it comes and goes. And I think all of us each day get to address our mental health.
Agree, yes.
Right? They struggle themselves with either anxiety, depression, OCD, or thoughts of hurting themselves, or postpartum issues health-wise, or they've already lost someone.
Yes.
And that's everyone on the planet. That's literally, so I hope people that don't deal with, that's why I didn't lead out with, we're going to talk about postpartum today, because a lot of times when we advertise we're going to talk suicide or postpartum, everyone's like, well, that's not me. That's not my family. That's not, and I guarantee you, it's your neighbor, it's your sister, it's yourself, it's your brother that is also dealing with those issues. Did you talk us through the days and weeks after the loss of Emily, and where Emily Effect came from, and how your family is doing? Specifically, I think for my brother who found my sister, there was a whole different process of grieving than for me, who planned the funeral, wrote the obituary, and found a mission and a why. Yeah. Every family grieves differently, and on the ReConnect podcast, I think this is where we have the conversation of how a family grieves at different levels, and for those that decide to take a tragedy and a loss and make a plan and a goal of changing the world, which I think is God in this. Emily is the great teacher, right?
She is, yep.
Yeah. Other family members can be like, why do you keep talking about this? Please stop talking about right? I know, I'm sure some of my extended family are thinking, really, why? Where is your family at, and where did the Emily effect come from, and how quickly after? Because I think we're not like the day after the funeral going, I think we'll do something about this issue. So
Right. So that night, of course, we were all in shock and disarray. This was completely contrary to anything we thought could have ever happened. And so as we came together as a family, and because of the nature of what happened, and we knew that it would be in the news, we had a very poignant conversation as a family, and realized that because her story was going to be shared, because we are connected to so many people through our family, that we wanted people to be able to understand the real story, which is her life, right? And to understand also what she went through, because we knew that other moms are also going through what she went through, and we knew that there could be improvements in how we take care of moms, and in promoting that awareness out there. And so it was actually that night that we knew that we wanted to do something about it.
Wow. And don't you think that's God's grace?
Yes.
Like, how do you, in the middle of such a horrific loss, come to a place of, wait a minute.
Yeah.
No one's talking about moms' mental health and well-being the way they should. We're not caring for our moms.
Exactly. Yeah, we felt that very strongly,
and you wanted to contain the story. You wanted to kind of drive the story instead of it driving you.
Yeah, we didn't want that to be the flashing lights and the accident to be what people knew of our sister, because that was not her, and that was not her life. But
I love that you didn't hide it either.
Exactly.
I get a lot of phone calls from religious leaders specifically that are planning funerals, or family members that have lost someone and they don't want to put suicide in the obituary. I have strong feelings about that. I don't think it perpetuates any shame. That we perpetuate is not helpful to our society.
And that was part of the conversation.
Yeah.
We weren't ashamed. She experienced something that 1 out of every 7, actually probably more, are experiencing.
Probably more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was in those, we were still obviously went through our grieving, and those first few months were very difficult. But I think because we had that experience, knowing that we needed to do something about it, we soon after that started spearheading this and coming together as a family, talking about what we wanted to do and why. And the name The Emily Effect came up as one of the options.
I just think it's so beautiful. It's such a perfect name, because the word effect for me is hopeful. It's not forever. It's a situation you may find yourself in for a long time, and those that deal with mental health issues their whole lives chronically, they need a different kind of support. I think my sister was one of those, 40 years old. She had tried a lot of things for a long time and got tired, right? Yes. But I love the word affect, because I think it means then we can affect it.
Affect change.
Affect change.
It's kind of has several aspects to it for us. It's number one is the effect that Emily had on people and in her life. That would be a whole other podcast to talk about how she impacted people. But I think that because of her, when people see her picture and her beautiful family and hear her story, they immediately think, me too, or I can relate to that, or I know somebody.
It gives permission.
Close. Yeah. So it affects people in that they realize that this is something that a lot of people are dealing with, that we can talk about it, and just wanting to affect the change and how we can better help moms. And was
it her husband, or was it you who said, we're formalizing this in a website, a place where people can go and get information? Who really said, we're going to put a name on it and we're going to make a place for it?
It was Eric. He even actually at the funeral, he talked about that. He shared that and said, I have a message to share. We need to create change. Emily's story needs to be shared. Who wants to join me? And then from there, as a family, we came together.
It's been a movement. Yeah, it really has.
It was our family and Emily's very close friend that we came together and planned what we wanted to do those couple months after she passed away.
So what one thing about Emily would you like to make sure everyone knows about her and what she was to you? What did you love about her as a sister? What was one of those things that the world is different because she's not here doing that or sharing that?
Yeah. It actually comes down to just a very simple but profound thing, and that is that she was kind. She was uniquely and beautifully and profoundly kind, and that's why she impacted so many people, and that was the feedback. We had story after story
Of her
from people, of
kindness.
her kindness. And I remember her being that way as a small child, and her being in high school. That was the age gap that we had. She was kind even in high school, and so
Which is not easy in high school.
No, she was beautiful on the inside and out. And for me, especially through her passing, I realized there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about an aspect of my life that she hasn't impacted, but it's through that pure, sweet, genuine kindness that she was the type of person that she would make sure to acknowledge somebody, or she saw a need and she would meet it. And she was so sweet and tender with her kids. And so it just goes such a long way, doesn't it?
So the reason I wanted to ask that, thank you for sharing that, is because in the work that I do, I always say that no one out there is extra. There's not one of you out there today that we would be better without you. And when I hear back from people that hear that and it changes their suicidal ideation or their struggle of worth, I think what's so profound is you didn't say, what I loved about Emily is she cured cancer. What I loved about Emily is she built a school in Africa.
Right.
What you loved about Emily is her simple kindness, right? So the world is not better without Emily. You and Eric have helped with friends and family to make her passing meaningful and to try to address and educate in a way that brings healing. I've tried to do the same with Meg. Meg was a loyal friend. She was also great at a dance party, right?
Yeah.
So I'm the same. There's not a day I think, oh gosh, with all the meaningful work I've tried to do because of her passing, my life's not better without her. So for the moms that are tired, that the laundry's piled up, that feel like they'll never be normal again. Sorry, I'm so emotional.
It's okay.
That feel somehow that we would be better, that their kids would be better, that their families would be better. We will never be better without you.
Exactly.
And even in your worst place, which I know you're thinking is going to be forever, what would you say as a closing takeaway to that mom that has an almost 1-year-old, has decided this can't be postpartum, feels like she will always be crazy and always be in that state, and crazy is the fear, right, that we're all going to be stuck this way. What would you say to them, to that person, to take the next step forward and hope?
I would say that to remember that what you're going through is not a long-term thing. It's real, and that it's valid, and we're not minimizing that in any way. But talking about it and acknowledging it is that step that is going to open the door to other opportunities to help you through it, so that it doesn't have to be a permanent in your life. And I would also want them to know for sure that their struggle is not in any way a reflection of their worth. If anything they have done or haven't done, it's something that they are experiencing on this journey that we're all experiencing in life. And we all go, whether it's postpartum or whether it's something else with our mental health along the way, it's part of our mortal experience here and being here.
Being a human.
Yes. And so reaching out, connecting with other humans, connecting with God, with a higher power. And I will say to them, too, that you can grow and be better in your life, can be richer because of your struggle and in spite of your struggle. And it starts with that first step in acknowledging and reaching out and connecting.
Thank you. I think it's you battle your battles to lead others through a battle. And I think that's oftentimes when you're in your darkest place, to consider that one day you'll be out of it and be a blessing to someone else that's now facing your same fight, can maybe give you that hope or that plan B. Brene Brown often says about giving yourself permission slips, writing them. Give yourself permission today to be human, and give yourself permission today to say, this isn't okay, I don't want to be this way forever, but I'm going to give myself permission to believe it won't be forever. Where can people find you, Megan, and where can they find Emily Effect, and what resources do you have available that you've compiled that will help in some way.
Yeah, so you can first find us on our website. There's more about Emily's story and our mission and what we're doing. One great resource we have on there is we actually have what are called letters of light and videos of light, where we've
I know they're really emotional.
where we've
by the
actually
way.
had other moms come out and share their stories. We received emails and messages within the first few days of Emily's passing saying, because I heard your sister's story, I'm reaching out and I'm getting help today. And so if we do anything with these efforts, it's to eliminate the shame. Yeah, it's to eliminate the shame and bring stories into light and to help women feel like they can reach out and connect. So that's one resource we have on there, is to go and connect with these other women and with their stories and realize that you're not alone in this. We also have listings of other resources in Utah and steps that you can take, things you can do to get help. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, where we're just sharing tips and getting help. A community,
yeah.
Community.
We can have a community from our closet if we find the right Instagram account to follow.
The battle
right?
is isolation and putting it out there and reaching out and owning your story and sharing. That's the way we battle the darkness and the isolation.
So the EmilyEffect.org or .com? I can't remember.
.org.
.org. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your work and your efforts. At the time of this taping, we just had news released of a new postpartum medication. We don't have a lot of information or opinions on that yet, but to me, it's a sign that we are having a different conversation. It's a sign to me that people in the medical community, in government, in societies, in communities are having a conversation around mothers' mental health and well-being and support. And I think there's other countries on the planet that do a better job about postpartum vacations or holiday time or time off work or our fathers being able to take time off as well to be a support. And we have a long ways to go, but there's some signals that at the time of Emily's passing, things are changing.
There's been some big changes.
And I think, like you said earlier, what we focus on, we see. And I'm going to choose to focus on that we're having new conversations about connection. And that's what we're trying to do here at the ReConnect podcast. Thank you, Megan, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, we could go on, and maybe we'll have you back because I believe so strongly in this conversation that we're having around mental health in a new way, to take away the shame, to give permission, and to reconnect with one another. So thank you for joining me, Ganel-Lyn, and please join us again on the ReConnect podcast.
Thank you for listening to the ReConnect podcast, sponsored by Anasazi Foundation. Anasazi Foundation is a wilderness therapy program for at-risk youth, and our mission is to help strengthen families. To learn more about us, please visit anasazi.org. And if you like this show, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Thank you again.